Recently in Florida, the state ran by Guantanamo Bay's #1 water boy, Ron DeSantis, passed a law allowing PragerU to be used in schools, and to take advantage of the increase of PragerU searches, I'm gonna make a video discussing it. PragerU, for the ones in my audience who are not chronically online, is a right-wing educational YouTube channel which was founded by Dennis Prager, a right-wing radio host who complained about the fact you shouldn't say the N-word, and was kicked off the Holocaust Memorial Council of America for complaining that Muslims should not be sworn in the office with the Quran. So somewhat of his takes, you should expect that his media network is probably horrible, which it is, with such videos like Facts Don't Care About Your Feelings, Why the West Has Been So Successful, and finally, Taking on Woke Inc. And those are just some of the ones hosted by Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro, you may ask, how can one company afford such an intelligent guy? Well, silly, the answer is this cool thing called billionaire funding. Some of their biggest contributors are Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, even Royal Dutch Shell. Also, their biggest funder, the Dan and Ferris Wilks brothers, who are billionaires in the oil industry. So you may be thinking, wow, Uncle Hector criticizing PragerU for no other reason than their politics. Another brave soul lost to the woke agenda. Well, no. Sure, Dennis Prager is an evil idiot, but not only does he want to indoctrinate the youth into his way of thinking, but even worse, every video is factually incorrect. So I decided that I haven't suffered enough, and I watched a bunch of different PragerU videos and debunked them using basic Google searches. In a more recent PragerU video, they asked a question, is America stolen land? So I'll just play the opening and we'll go from there.
If you attended college, this is what you were likely taught. America was founded through acts of genocide, accompanied by larceny on the grandest scale. Columbus and the Europeans who followed him sailed to the New World with the intention of exploiting whomever they found, and, if necessary, enslaving or exterminating them. Soon afterwards, they began importing black bodies from Africa. They then built the world's richest country out of a combination of slave labor, stolen land, and environmental destruction.
Yes. Is what he said incorrect? The literal White House, home of the nation's leader, was built with slaves, and the land DC is built on had natives living on it before they were kicked out. The video's host then goes on to say that acknowledging this history will lead to societal failure, somehow. The host of this episode, Jeff Finn Paul, whose claim to fame is his new book, Not Stolen, then claims the genocide of Native Americans is a narrative that no honest historian would believe. He then claims that radical liberals believe that Europeans committed all of the world's evil and natives were a peaceful people who could do no wrong. Quite a bold claim that anyone believes that. What's his source, you may be asking? A right-wing think tank. He then proceeds to say that every nation was built on stolen land and killed its native peoples, so why is it so bad when we do it? He then goes on to claim that since Europeans didn't know disease would spread to the natives, we're not responsible, except when the Europeans were. He also claims that since the natives in North America were often nomadic, the idea that they had any right to any land was foolish. Then the video ends. So one video in, we're already denying genocide. If we get 2 more videos that also deny genocide in a row, we'll get a free coupon to Ben Shapiro's new book.
Up yours, woke moralists. We'll see who cancels who.
So in the next video, we find ourselves with Canadian professor Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson taught psychology at Toronto University and was a therapist up into 2017. His claim to fame was lying about Canadian Bill C-16, which made it basically illegal to discriminate against someone for their gender expression or gender identity. Jordan Peterson got famous by lying, saying that if he misgenders someone, the Canadian secret police would take him to a prison and convert him to a liberal using Chinese water torture. After that, he would become addicted to benzos, and now he was allegedly brain damaged after having multiple seizures in a coma in a shady Russian clinic, and now, like all good people, he works for Ben Shapiro. This video is mainly about how colleges and schools are infiltrated by, as he puts it, a gang of nihilists. If you're noticing a trend, PragerU hates colleges. The reason is, usually if you go to college, you're less likely to be right-wing. There are 2 reasons for this possibly. Either colleges are recruitment centers for leftist thought, or the more educated are just less likely to be right-wing. You can decide what you think is true.
It's now possible to complete an English degree and never encounter Shakespeare.
one of those dead white males whose works underlie our society of oppression.
Wow, I can't believe they're not teaching Shakespeare in schools anymore. What do you mean the source of this information is a right-wing news network funded by the Coke Industries, and that the college in question still teaches Shakespeare? Jordan Peterson lying? He would never. Jordan Peterson then goes on to discuss what I can only describe as the postmodernist triforce, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how the radical postmodernists want everyone to have a quality of outcome without citing any sources except a definition of equity. He then goes on to say that leftist educators are teaching college students all over the nation to reject the free market. In the video, it shows a lady buying groceries and giving a cashier a $20 bill, which is only going to go to his boss, while saying free voluntary exchange benefits everybody involved. Jordan Peterson then says that the free market has lifted billions out of poverty, and his source is this.
Question: how is capitalism compatible with your definition of good if it requires ever-increasing use?
He also shows the OECD's Better Life Index, which shows America at the top of the list, which seems like a good thing, but in its methodology, it doesn't include things like access to healthcare or access to education. If you include those statistics, America would rank much lower than many other Western nations. He then mentions how socialism failed in Venezuela, which is incorrect since Venezuela is not socialist. Venezuela actually failed because 95% of their economy is based in oil, which had a price collapse in 2016, and government mismanagement of crucial industries. Jordan Peterson then goes on to say this.
Believe in individuals. You're an exemplar of your race, sex, or sexual preference. You're also either a victim or an oppressor. No wrong can be done by anyone in the former group, and no good by the latter.
The source for both of these claims are the YouTube video Jordan Peterson on Diversity and an article he wrote. He cited himself twice, then he proceeds to rant about how Karl Marx invented identity politics, and he cites himself as a source again. He ends the video off by warning the audience that what has happened to universities will happen to the rest of America. The entire video was just Jordan Peterson lying and deceiving his audience using big words to scare them for his profit, just like the rest of his career.
Well, I'm black now, so the first thing I did was quit all my jobs. I don't know how I'm supposed to pay the bills. Probably have to start selling crack.
So the video is titled The Top 5 Issues Facing Black Americans and is hosted by Talib Starks. You may notice something different about him compared to the last two hosts. What is it, you may ask? If it's not obvious, Talib Starks is a Sagittarius. Talib Stark's claim to fame is he is an author and he wrote multiple books. One is called Black Lives Matter and the other is, anyways, to the top 5. Reason number 5, according to him, is the victim mentality. Saying that once someone identifies as a victim, they won't do anything to move out of that mindset and they won't take action for themselves. The idea that African Americans should take action for themselves is one of the main ideas in Black conservatism, which promotes the idea that one shouldn't blame discrimination by the government for not succeeding in life. The speaker then goes on to say that the victim mentality is promoted through Black media and, as he puts it, Black grievance groups, like the NAACP. Yikes. Reason number 4, the lack of diversity. When I heard this point, I was interested since PragerU usually advocates for a lack of diversity, so I did not know what to expect. I was disappointed to find out Starks is only referring to diversity of thought, and by diversity of thought, he is complaining because people call him an Uncle Tom. He then claims because of labels like Uncle Tom, people like Thomas Sowell and Walter Williams, who are libertarian professors, are ignored, and not because they're just wrong. Reason number 3, urban terrorism. With a claim like this, you may be thinking Black ISIS is roaming the streets, running amok of things, and will need to resurrect Ronald Reagan to invent gun control again to stop this. But no, sadly the speaker is just referring to the high level of crime in the African American community. He then proceeds to use the 1350 statistic, which is a right-wing talking point.
That blacks accounted for almost half of the nation's homicide victims, 47.4%, and more than half of the offenders, 52.4%, all while being 13% of America's population.
I wonder if there's a reason why African Americans are more likely to turn to crime. He finally ends his point by saying that urban terrorism is caused by reason number 2, which is... Reason number 2, the rise of baby mamas. For the crackers in my audience, a baby mama is someone who has kids but is not involved with the father. He then uses the statistic that 70% of black families do not have a father, which is false. The statistic is only counting married black couples, so if your parents weren't married when they had you, you are considered fatherless. In reality, most African Americans grow up with their father. And the speaker's only point is that baby mamas deserve more shame and criticism. Reason number 1. The unquestioning allegiance to so-called progressive policies. He cites Detroit as an example of what progressive policies do to a city, then he proceeds not to name a single progressive policy that caused Detroit to fail. Detroit failed because the owners of the automobile factories could save money by moving production to Asia and Mexico, and with the jobs gone, the wealthy white residents of the city fled to the suburbs or to other parts of the country, leaving Detroit's poor African American population to itself. Democrats didn't kill Detroit, capitalism did. So finally, we're at the end of the road, and I have saved the worst for last. Steven Crowder is a right-wing comedian. He's most famous for his racist and homophobic remarks, and his series Change My Mind, where he goes to college campuses to argue with children. Recently, Steven Crowder has been facing controversy for a variety of reasons. He claimed that a $50 million contract to work for Ben Shapiro is a slave contract. There was also a video released from his ex-wife showing him abusing her while she was pregnant. And in more recent news, Steven Crowder is under fire for sexually abusing his male employees and just mistreating them in general. In a video titled "Democratic Socialism is Still Socialism," he claims that just because something is democratically chosen, it doesn't change what it means. He gives some examples like Hamas, which isn't socialist, and says they are democratically elected even though their charter advocates for the murder of all Jews, which it doesn't. He then claims that socialism failed in Zimbabwe, which can't be true because Zimbabwe isn't socialist. Zimbabwe's issues stem from corruption and hyperinflation. He then goes on to mention Venezuela again, which I don't want to debunk that point again. He then mentions Sweden and how the billionaire CEO of IKEA had to flee the country because of the taxes were high, which he says is a fall of socialism, which doesn't make sense because taxes are not socialism. Steven Crowder then claims that a 180% taxes on cars in Denmark made it so the middle class cannot afford a car anymore, which isn't true. In reality, the tax was broken up into brackets, meaning cars were still available for most of the middle class. Steven Crowder then finally says that free enterprise can only be voluntary.
Free enterprise, which can only occur truly through voluntary transaction.
Except when it isn't.
Would you mind defining woke? Because it's come up a couple times and I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
So, I mean, woke is sort of the idea that
PragerU is interesting since it's not an isolated thing. Right-leaning content has been growing on YouTube due to it being a lot more profitable than left-leaning content, and it's resulted in the rise of radicalization, and the scary thing is for targeting kids more and more. Look at Ben Shapiro's YouTube channel. He's talking about Lizzo and reacting to TikToks, and look at those thumbnails. Ben Shapiro and most of the right is attempting to appeal to younger people since the older generations are dying out and the less right-leaning Gen Z is starting to reach voting age. The future of the Republican Party is being put into question. So we're trying to target young people, specifically kids, more and more since that's their only chance of a future. For example, PragerU has a kids channel now where they have two PNGs running around talking to MLK about how segregation wasn't that bad and actually states' rights need to be respected. And not only are young people being targeted more with this content, the content itself is becoming more radical. And YouTube recommends these videos. You can watch a video from this moron, get recommended a video from this one, and you go deeper and deeper, then boom, you get a literal Nazi, or worse. And this has led to a rise of hate crimes and shootings. Multiple shooters, for example, have been shown to be big fans of Ben Shapiro and other right-leaning pundits. And with PragerU being used in school, you're putting people directly onto that track. So, yeah. My epic gamer advice is don't fall down the alt-right pipeline. Bye!